Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
Training through and after pregnancy. What's the best approach? How would we at Functional Bodybuilding take a look at this? But because I've never had a child and you have, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What questions come to mind for you? And if you could share anything about your own experience and what you know now, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have 2 kids, and through both of my pregnancies, I was doing martial arts. So I was doing Kung Fu, and I trained through both of those pregnancies. And afterwards, so went back to Kung Fu after my babies were born. And that was a lot of body weight training and getting your heart rate up, doing some forms. And we also did sparring, but I just didn't do any sparring, obviously, when I was pregnant. But I definitely have a lot of thoughts around what questions I know I had, which I think are very similar to what a lot of people are thinking and experiencing. And also, I just wish that I had had functional bodybuilding in my life during those times, because I had a fantastic experience staying active during and after my pregnancy, but it would have been a perfect fit for functional bodybuilding, I think. And there's definitely a lot of potential to meet the needs of some moms out there.
Yeah. Well, my wife went through 2 pregnancies being more or less a functional bodybuilder. And I think the same goes for, well, a number of our personal clients that we've had over the years.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been, and I know there have been, Persist members and ATS members over the years that have done our programs through pregnancies, and they've asked questions along the way and gotten support. So I think there's definitely some good, we have a good track record of actually, doing this with people who are actually pregnant.
Yeah.
What are the questions that you think come up the most? Like, what are the fears that might stand in the way of somebody keeping up a fitness routine when they're pregnant?
Sure. Well, I think obviously the number one concern is just safety for the pregnancy. So it's not the time to push your edge and go to the max and do a major competition or redline it, go to 100%. It's just the time to stay moving, keep up what strength that you have, keep your body supple and prepare for labor, and keep your body healthy. And really, movement is the best thing for that. So it's going to be a much easier pregnancy if you stay active than if you just do nothing. But I think the fear is, well, how much should I be doing? And how do I know if I'm pushing too hard, or if I'm the kind of person who's used to feeling really athletic? Do I need to pull back? And how do I adjust things for that? And so I know that the way I approached it was just knowing that my concern was for the pregnancy first and foremost. It just wasn't worth it if I was ever worried about it. So if I ever felt like my heart rate was getting up really high, or I was getting a little bit dizzy or whatever, it was just like, okay, just chill. Like, there's no need to, stay on this clock or finish this workout, or like it's going to be fine.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think that certainly more and more with, people that they struggle to get pregnant. Like you finally have this opportunity, and you don't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
And so playing everything on the safe side is great, is the right decision. Now, I don't want that to be, play it so safe that you decide, I'm going to stop all movement altogether.
Right.
Because I think that actually increases risk in another way. Being sedentary has a lot of drawbacks in and around anybody's life, but in particular pregnancy too. You want to give yourself the best chance at having a good pregnancy for the full term, not just like, okay, I'm going to back off during this first trimester because I'm like really nervous and it's all new. And then you find yourself unmotivated to start movement again. Second trimester comes around. Third trimester, you've been pretty sedentary this whole time. And now we're starting to see some issues around your, your metabolic health and gestational diabetes, which could or could not be associated with movement, but being not moving, and I'll address this in a second, has its own metabolic consequences. As humans, like there's this flow of energy that comes in. We eat food, we turn it into usable forms of energy, and then we got to move. We got to move and expend that energy. And if we don't move, we have ways of burning fuel, like we have basal metabolism that needs to happen. But the more you can kind of move energy out, being active, keeping your muscle mass and your muscle tissue active and lifting and doing things against resistance, this is I call it the metabolic sink. It's like when the food goes in, it goes down the drain of the metabolic sink, which is your activity, your muscle mass, your lean tissue, your fitness. Talk about food during pregnancy, because like this is such a big obstacle for pregnant women. It's, I'm not hungry, I'm starving, like I don't know what to eat, nothing is appealing to me. There's issues around digestion, there's a whole host of things that are going on, much of which I think can have a huge positive impact from building our metabolic sink.
Yes.
So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, great. Well, the symptoms of pregnancy are extremely real. And I feel like sometimes women just sort of seem to get blamed for everything. It's like you can't win. So it's like, if you are feeling tired and nauseous, it's bad because you can't like stay moving. And then if you're active, it's like you're too active. And it's like there's a lot of, pressure to sort of get it right. And especially women feel like they want to achieve a healthy pregnancy. And so they're very motivated to try to do the right things. But I feel like they're first and foremost, there's a lot of conflicting messages out there. So I think that, the nausea and the fatigue can really have this compounding effect where it does make it harder to eat regular meals and start to get your momentum up to move your body a bit. And so I want to say first that it's not about discounting those symptoms and saying that those aren't very real and very difficult to contend with sometimes. I think it's more that if you can work with your body when you're feeling that way and just do a little bit, start a little bit, try a little bit, try a little movement, try a little nutrition, try to get active a little bit. If you can sort of rev up your engine a little, you'll get more momentum and everything will just work better. So I felt like that when it was the sinking ship of nausea and fatigue and I really just wanted to get in bed and eat Pringles, if I instead went for a walk or tried to do a class and just said, I'm just going to do what I can do here. Mm-hmm. Then it was like, oh, actually, I feel like I could eat something a little bit healthier. I feel like I can get more rest tonight. I feel like I have a little bit more energy for tomorrow.
So it's almost like you're saying you got to have some discipline early on. You're not going to be motivated necessarily to do it, like especially in the first trimester when those symptoms hit for real.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily about the kind of discipline that's like, I'm going to be so hardcore and muscle through every obstacle. It's more like, yeah, those symptoms are real and you are going to feel like crap sometimes. And that's perfectly okay. But it's more just, can you try a little bit instead of, just giving into that? And trying usually yields a lot of positive results.
Sweet. So then if we're talking about like, what are the, well, I want to actually go back to something you said early on, which is, the health and the safety of the pregnancy and both baby and mom. This is not the time to X, Y, and Z. You mentioned a few things. One thing I've heard referred to a lot is like, well, what can I be doing?
Yeah.
And the reality is you can do, I've seen pregnant women doing hardcore CrossFit, to the day they gave birth.
Yeah.
I mean, Megan was doing handstand push-ups
I remember.
2 days before she had Noah. So, and that's not to say that's super hardcore. It's just to say that anything is really possible. I think the key, the way to define what you should do is, what were you doing before?
Yes.
And then you can really sustain that. It's not the time to ramp way up. It's also not the time to cut way, way back.
Right.
I think any big deviation from what you were doing before you were pregnant, or at least you found out you were pregnant, to what you started doing after you found out you were pregnant, that's where you're going to see the biggest either risk or detriment to your well-being, physical and mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to going to the gym 5 days a week before you got pregnant, training it with weights for an hour, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. I'm gonna start doing a little bit of Pilates and 2 days a week and going for a walk once a week because I'm really gonna tone it down. Like that shift, in what the stimulus that your body was used to is going to be significant.
Yeah.
Regardless of how the pregnancy symptoms feel, and vice versa. Hey, I haven't been doing anything, but I'm pregnant now. I got to have a good pregnancy. I got to start lifting weights, and you start going and smashing weights every day. There's a whole stress response that's happening there on top of this other stress response.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that, I can't remember, I think it was my second pregnancy. I actually tested for either my second or third degree black belt in mid-pregnancy, because that's just what the timing happened to fall. And it can take a year or more to work up to a test like that. And so that was when it was, and I didn't want to postpone it anymore. And so there's a video somewhere of me 7 months pregnant, jumping around with a sword. And
Can we please get that? Come on now.
I wasn't jumping very high. But it's a great point, because I wasn't pulling back too far from what I had been used to doing.
Yes.
And so I felt very comfortable taking a difficult test at that moment in time, because I had been training through the whole pregnancy and long before. And so it was something that my body was very accustomed to, and I just modified the things that I needed to and pulled back where I needed to. So it's important to stay aligned with where you're at currently and not make a huge change in what you did pre-pregnancy to what you do in the pregnancy, but you also don't have to just turn into a delicate flower the second you get pregnant.
Now there's there's at least two things I want to keep talking about. There's sort of third trimester, how do you have to modify the movements of your life in the gym, because there's you now have this physical object, your uterus is growing massively.
Your object.
You have a belly, you've got things going on that are just changing how you feel.
A lot going on.
A lot going on there. You have a watermelon between your legs that is,
okay,
changing things up. Just trying to give a little reference for our male listeners who are listening. It's this would be hard to start to deadlift and to squat and figure out how to do push-ups and do different things. I used to do burpees. That doesn't really feel like the right thing to do right now. And so I have some experience, because I remember coaching Megan through a lot of this, and us just being we're not going to do that anymore.
Right.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. What's the mentality heading into that phase of pregnancy with movement?
Well, first of all, your joints change. So your body is preparing to basically change shape so that you can give birth to your baby. And you're going to have a lot more elasticity in your joints, which makes it a little bit riskier to get into those end ranges of motion safely, because you could easily just take it too far. So I think that that's one thing to consider, is just your overall elasticity. You have a significant weight gain. So the body that you used to have is now 20, 30 pounds heavier. I don't know, could be more. I can't remember how much weight I gained, but it was significant. I think I probably gained 40 pounds. And your center of gravity is off. And there are specific movement considerations where if you're pregnant, your doctor will talk to you about this, but it's like you shouldn't lie on your back and do a bench press because you'll compress a certain nerve and things like that. So just some movements that are just obvious that you might need to modify a little bit. But I will say that because those changes happen gradually, you do have time to acclimate to them. And for example, during the end of my pregnancy, I was actually feeling better than ever because I had some of the energy coming back. And right at the very end, when you're about to give birth, like those last couple weeks are rough. But somewhere in the second to third trimester, you can still get a lot of great movement in.
Yeah.
And, I can imagine if I had some dumbbells and was doing box step-ups and, there were just all kinds of things that I can imagine would feel really good.
Yeah, I remember that somewhere in the second trimester, after the nausea was like kind of gone and Megan's appetite normalized a bit, she was like, I love this. Like, this is good. Like, I feel great. And then of course, there's a point at which your body has gotten considerably bigger where it's like, this is just, I'm ready for this to be over. It's a great time that's the time you're going to want to like get the movement and the training going again. And that's probably what you were referring to. It's like, hey, during that first trimester, when the symptoms, the nausea symptoms, the feeling of just like the hormones like are new and different, where you're wanting to not do anything, it's a time to really like, discipline behaviors, or at least, maintain some of these habits where you keep some movement up and do your best so that when you reach that second phase where you're like, I feel good, you can continue to like, you have those habits in place, you have the not the discipline, but the consistency going, and you can keep up your training and maybe even feel like, I can challenge myself a little bit. This feels good again.
Yeah.
When you talked about like the changes that are happening in your joints, like, there's different hormones that are starting to kind of upregulate in the body to soften, ligaments so that, your joints can expand, your pelvis can expand, you can actually deliver a child. It does introduce this potential, call it risk, right? People who are hypermobile, hey, you can get into great positions. Look at you. You can squat and they're not really strong in those positions because they haven't trained them that end range. This is not good mobility. This is just good flexibility, but mobility, there's a strength component in those positions. So a training element that we are very, we utilize all the time in our training programs is, the concept of like tempo resistance training. It's controlling, slowing things down at key ranges of motion where we're often vulnerable. End range of motion, pauses, and really just slowing down the eccentric portions or the negatives or the lowering portion of weight training movements so that we feel like we're under control. We're not using just like stretch reflexes, which happen, when you stretch a muscle quickly, it gets a little bit of like a rebound. If you're in a hypermobile state, then you really don't want to be doing that. Like doing traditional Olympic lifting, like a clean where you catch the bar and you bounce out of the bottom of your squat. If your ankles, knees, hips, pelvis are really hypermobile in your pregnancy, or they're becoming more or flexible, soft, like you don't want to be bouncing out of the bottom of your squat under any significant load or under any significant speed. So tempo training would be something that I would highly recommend anybody going through, pregnancy who wants to keep up their resistance training. It's like, this is just an area that you now can implement and have more control over your weights that you're lifting.
Yep. Yeah. Tempo is amazing for the pregnant situation. I think that, that level of control. And because you still have room to express your strength as a pregnant woman. And in fact, going into labor and having a child, and even the physical nature of hauling a baby carrier and a diaper bag up and down stairs and pushing a stroller.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to like post-pregnancy stuff.
I know we haven't, but this is your time to prepare. Yes. It is a major physical feat. So
totally.
Yeah, using tempo to still maintain your strength, but to be mindful of those end ranges is the perfect way to go.
One more thing I'll throw in before we get to like post-pregnancy is anytime, and everyone's going to go through different birth plans and different, it's going to look different for each person. I know for us, we had a hospital birth, and there were, there was anesthesia, there was, medications, there was pain management, there was stuff that was going into Megan's body, and it's a major, it's a major event. It's in some cases it ends up having to be invasive. Maybe someone has a C-section, gets an epidural. Maybe there's other medications that go in. It can look a lot of different ways. Some people do births that have none of that stuff, but there's still a trauma. There's still, a major stress that happens to the physical body. And going into any medical procedure, especially if there's going to be anything that's invasive or any medications or drugs that are used, I will always encourage clients, and this could be someone who's going for an orthopedic procedure or something, having a more robust cardiovascular system, like a more trained cardiovascular system. You are going to process and get rid of some of the waste products that entered your body during the procedure. It's like, hey, I'm going in for knee surgery. I'm like, okay, let's get you on doing a ton of cardio prior to, so that when you have the knee surgery and they inject you with this drug and that drug and give you general anesthesia and so forth, like when you wake up from that, you are going to feel crappy for several days. But if you're more fit, aerobically fit, the faster you're going to come back from that than somebody who doesn't have good, aerobic cardiovascular clearance and output. Not to mention that as you grow this baby inside of you, your blood volume is also increasing a lot too.
Right.
You now have this placenta, you're feeding blood to this child. There is plenty of additional cardiovascular work that needs to be done.
Yep.
So I would just say that, resistance training, tempo resistance training, exploring ranges of motion in, deep squats and in and around your hips, things that can keep your pelvis and your hips strong. That's great for the actual labor and delivery and for post-pregnancy when you're going to be, schlepping this child around.
Yep.
But there's also a huge important aspect of training that has to involve aerobic fitness. And I think that doing consistent aerobic fitness, and if it's just walking, but if it's brisk walking, if it's doing like extended long periods of that, or some cardio machine that feels really good to you, I think that is something that I would encourage people going through pregnancy to prioritize. Just be like, I got to keep my cardio up very high for those reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think cardio going into the birth is a great idea within, the range that feels safe for you. I think that towards the end of a pregnancy, that's when, you're going to be wanting to monitor things very, very closely. And so there may be a time when you just may need to do some bed rest toward the end.
Totally.
That's totally individual pregnancy. But assuming that everything is good to go and you're cleared for movement, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And think about cardio, not just in like the intervals or like the Metcons that you've done before. Like if you think of cardio as like getting your heart rate jacked up to the top, like yeah. I'm talking get on a bike,
sustainable,
110 beats per minute, 120 beats per minute for 30 minutes. Yeah. That zone 2 cardio is so impactful. Perfect. I mean, that's super powerful for every human, but yeah. I think there's a lot of benefit that could happen there.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. And then, so now we've just had this finished pregnancy, labor and delivery. Yeah. You basically just got hit by a truck.
Yep.
And what should be your expectation after?
Yes. I am dying to talk about this part.
Okay.
Because I was not prepared. And I do not think that the conventional media does a good job of conveying what this is actually like. And I would really love to share my experience with us. So after I had my first child, I tore during labor.
Yep.
And I was recovering and a first-time parent and trying to figure out how to breastfeed, and even pooping was like a traumatic event.
Yeah.
And that was like the time to heal from a catastrophic physical and emotional event.
Totally.
I was sobbing every day. I was completely overwhelmed. And so if you have it in your mind, like, I'm going to just bounce back, like that was not the way it went for me.
Yeah.
And so I just want to put that out there, that it's very realistic that it's going to take time, because your body has been through a major event.
Yes.
And so it's not to say that you should give up on movement. I think that when you feel up to it, going for walks is really therapeutic, doing
Totally.
a little gentle movement, but it's just, let's let go of the expectation that we're all just going to be like powering through the finale and getting like right back to our, pre-pregnancy bodies. Like, no, not at all. Yeah.
No.
No. So, I think that that's really the time to eat, sleep, get emotional support, figure out how to bond with your baby. Like, all those things are first priority.
Yep.
When you feel ready, I think that your body has a really good mechanism of telling you what it can do and what it can't do. And after pregnancy, after you give birth, you're still going to be bleeding for several weeks. And what I did was adjust my activity level based on that flow. So if it was picking up a lot, that was a sign to me that my body was needing a little bit more rest. And so that was a way to kind of gauge energy. And then the other thing was just, like you kind of know what you're up for. And I think that having in mind that getting back after pregnancy, your body has just taken 9 months to go through this transformation, and it's probably going to take a similar amount of time to start to come back.
Sure.
And so just letting go of any rush to do anything, I think was the key for me to be able to find a way back to movement where it was actually coming from my own like physical readiness, rather than me trying to make things worse by pushing too hard.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that insight. And I'll share from my experience that, to engage in physical activity, like there's been phases of my life where everything could be like totally awry, like emotionally, mentally, but I could just like, I'm going to anchor my physical body. And then that's going to be the place that like helps me balance everything out. I think that post-pregnancy and watching what Megan went through and just what I've seen others go through, I don't think that's really the situation. I don't think you're going to be able to be like, okay, I got, what you talked about, like emotionally, like connecting with your child, like figuring out how to care for this child, like all the things that go into nursing, cleaning it being fed in the middle of the night, like, and then, okay, now like I'm this train wreck over here. We've got this baby that everyone's paying attention to. Like, who's paying attention to me? Like, emotionally, like, where do I fit into this whole thing? There are some boxes that really need to be attended to first before you even have the physical resources to go and engage in fitness, Whereas, like, I could be an emotional wreck, a mental head case, but I could go and lift some heavy weights, and then that gets me all ready to do the other stuff, like, there'll come a time for that where like you can use movement and fitness as, post-pregnancy to like ground yourself and like, I'm going to go and I need to go, mom's going to go for a walk or go lift some weights or do something. And I'm going to come back and be like ready to handle more stuff. But in that first week, maybe 2 weeks, like not really accessible. It's not really, that's not the order that things I think can go in particular, because you're also healing from a major trauma too.
Yeah.
So just to set that expectation. And then, if ever, if you're a partner to somebody that's going through their pregnancy, or their delivery and that period of time right afterwards, it's really the time to just not place any expectations on, what they're doing. Like, just it's time to step up and kind of do it as much as you possibly can, because the demands on just acclimating to life after you've gone through delivery and that big 9-month pregnancy is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was 6 weeks before I went back to Kung Fu after I had my baby, maybe 6 or 7. And it was really good. And that time had really paid off to just, be walking around or just chilling at home, and healing. And I think it's not to say that it couldn't happen faster for someone who has like a really easy pregnancy and delivery and they just feel great. I'm not going to, say like, whoa, like, but just to, set the expectation that it's really every pregnancy has its own little story, and every recovery has its own little story. We're so unique with that. So I just think that it's really the time to listen to your body and do what feels right for you and let go of any of the pressure of being on a timeline.
Yeah. And then there will come a time where you're very motivated to say, I want to get my body back.
Yeah.
And this is another area to really set some expectations, because especially if you're first time mother, being able to control the variables that lead to you getting your body back when you have no kids versus your ability to control the variables that helps you get your body back when you have kids is vastly different. Huge. It's like, I mean, this goes for every part of life, but it's like, single or partnered with no kids, like, you have all the time in the world. You think you don't, but you do. And then when there's one kid or multiple kids, your resources are being spent in other areas. So you maybe, let's say, spent 10 hours cumulative a week really thinking about how you're going to maintain your body. 5 of those were working out. The other 5 were planning your meals and cooking them. Now you're like, okay, I'm post-pregnancy. I want to get my body back. Where did those 10 hours go? Holy smokes, I only have 5 of those hours. So you get the workouts in, but you don't have time to meal plan, to prep your food because you're busy with, the constraints are there.
Yeah.
In a way that, maybe weren't there in the past. Now, some people are highly disciplined. They have it all dialed. They adjust things in their life. They still make it happen. And some people, that's not how they organized their life before, and they're now struggling to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's just to say, like, the body that you had before you were pregnant, like, you can get that back. There are changes, of course, that happen after a pregnancy. You'll have some stretch marks, maybe you'll have different fat deposits in places. Maybe you'll have gained some weight that you never had before, that you're like, wow, I've never had to get this extra 5 to 10 pounds of body fat off my body before. So there's going to be some maybe different challenges in getting that body back, but it's there to get back. It's not like a pregnancy completely changed your body forever. It's more in the practical application of how do I achieve that? What does it take? Well, it takes time moving. It takes time eating the right food and preparing the right food. It takes time resting and getting enough sleep. All these things that, sleep, food, train, recover. That's how you build a body.
Mm-hmm.
When you got a kid around, it's going to cut into some of those things. You might not have the best sleep, which is going to impact your food and your cravings and your diet. It's going to impact how intensely you can work out because you're tired. It's going to change some of the equation of how you achieve a body that you want. So I just think that that's important to like acknowledge and recognize. It's like, I think a lot of people say, like, I hear it a lot. It's like, well, my body was never the same after pregnancy. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And that could very well be a real truth. But the other part is that your lifestyle was never the same after you had a baby. It will never be the same.
Yeah.
And therefore, those lifestyle components are where we can help and work with you to like, how do we manage that? How do we optimize that to help you feel and look the way you want to look again? Any thoughts in that as kind of maybe our final, the final portion of this?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, if you are breastfeeding, you are going to require more calories. Not a huge amount, but for me, I was starving. And the impact of breastfeeding on my body was basically like, I need an extra cheeseburger every day to feel like I'm like able to deal with the world.
Yeah.
So that was my own experience. And I remember being maybe 2-3 months after giving birth, and I still hadn't gotten my body back. I was carrying extra weight and I wasn't loving it. And I was like, okay, maybe now's the time to start to dial back my calories and pay more attention to what I'm eating and try to like diet, And I think I made it a day, and I was angry and like emotionally like distraught. And I was like, this is not worth it. I'm just going to let this whole idea go.
Yeah.
And just focus on eating and sleeping and maintaining my activity, and forgot all about it. And gradually everything for me just went back to fairly close to the way it was before my pregnancy. So that's not to say it's going to work like that for every woman. We're all very different, but I think that it's so important to recognize that, just like you said, you do not have the same life that you did before.
Yeah.
And I felt like having a baby meant having to figure everything out again. Like, how do I figure out how to sleep now that there's this baby? How do I figure out how to feed myself now that there's this baby? It was like literally trying to learn my whole life again, with the addition of like holding onto this little person or feeding this little person or caring for this little person. And fitness is the same thing. How do I re-engage in my movement in a way that allows me to like be with this little person? And so maybe it's like the stroller walks, and you totally have to change your routine. And so I think that the expectation is really important. Just that, yes, there is a way to feel strong and feel confident and feel like you are engaging with your body the way that feels really good for you. It's just that it might not look the way that it did in the least before you had a child. And you have to just figure it out now that you're in your new life with your new circumstance.
Yeah. Great. Those are great thoughts. I'll add one thing here too, and that is, from a movement perspective, little kids, little babies, like, they're super fun to play with. They're super cute, and they also don't need that much like engagement and activity, like with you, to the point where you need to like drop your whole, like everything you're doing and just like sit on the floor with this child. Like that is, that is the death of your movement. So it's like, that first year, maybe even the first year and a half, like put that baby in a stroller and get to walking. Like I walked a lot with our first baby.
Yeah.
And then by the time we had our second baby, the first baby wanted to kind of like, didn't like to be in the stroller as long, but it's like when you have the opportunity with that stroller and they're happy in there and they take naps, it's like, get out and move, get your 15,000 steps a day, right? 10,000 steps a day. Like that's an hour and a half of walking. And if you break that up into a couple stroller walks, like that's doable. And that is a massive, massive shift to how your body's like expending energy, utilizing the food, processing nutrients, building your cardiovascular system back, even building your pelvic floor back from walking. That's such a powerful tool for building up your hips. I just can't stress enough how important that is. And, it's like, you don't have to schedule exercise. You just need to take that baby for a walk, and, if you feel up for it and the baby is happy getting into a pack, you can put that pack on your body, pushing or walking with the baby in the Bjorn or in the backpack or whatever. Yeah. It's a great way to do some, resisted walking. And so I remember that being something that I did a lot of, Megan did a lot of, we did as a family, and just such a great gentle way to build back, and then a great way to just like keep the movement going. Getting out for walks every day, and then being able to add in your 30 minutes of resistance training or your pump 40, all that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, if you're expecting, want to go through, you want to have children, any partner in this process is going to get some value, I think, from this conversation. So thanks for your insight, and we'll see you on the next episode, everyone.
Yeah. See you next time.